The radio crackled with static, then silence. Colonel Marcus Brennan pressed the headset closer to his ear, willing the voice to return. Outside the command bunker, the desert wind carried the acrid smell of burning fuel and something worse. 3 hours ago, Bravo Company had gone dark somewhere in the Kandahar Valley. 42 Marines vanished like smoke in the Afghan wasteland. "Sir, we're getting nothing from their position," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Last transmission was taking heavy fire, requesting immediate air support. That was at 3:47 hours. Brennan stared at the tactical display, red dots marking last known positions scattered across the digital map like drops of blood on sand. Intelligence had been wrong again. What should have been a routine reconnaissance patrol had walked into a hornet's nest of Taliban fighters, complete with heavy weapons and improvised explosive devices. The kind of trap that turned Marines into statistics. The silence stretched between radio checks, each unanswered call sign another nail in the coffin. "Viper 6, this is base. Respond." Nothing. "Thunder 1-1, radio check. Static." "Bulldog actual, come in." The void swallowed every transmission. "Colonel," Rodriguez's voice cracked slightly, "we've got families back home waiting for Christmas calls from these boys." Brennan closed his eyes. He'd written too many letters, attended too many flag-folded ceremonies. The weight of command sat on his shoulders like lead armor, each decision measured in lives that couldn't be taken back. Outside, the first hint of dawn painted the eastern horizon a pale orange, indifferent to the crisis unfolding in the valley below. "What about air support?" Rodriguez asked. "We've got F-16s at Bagram, Apache gunships at." "Negative," Brennan cut him off. "Command pulled everything for Operation Steel Thunder. We're flying solo until 1200 hours. He didn't mention that Steel Thunder was a political photo opportunity, a chance for generals to show off new equipment while his Marines bled out in a valley that didn't exist on any press release. The radio hissed again, then a voice emerged from the static, weak, distorted, but unmistakably American. Any station, this is Viper 6. We are combat ineffective. Repeat, combat ineffective. Multiple KIA, running low on ammunition. We need immediate extraction or we're not making it home." Brennan grabbed the handset. "Viper 6, this is base actual. What's your situation?" "Sir, we walked into a kill zone. They were waiting for us. We've got wounded who won't last another hour without medevac and we're surrounded. They're closing in." The colonel's jaw tightened. No air support. No reinforcements. No miracles left in his tactical playbook. Just 42 Marines counting down their final hours while he sat in a concrete bunker, helpless as a priest at a gunfight. Then, cutting through the despair like a blade through silk, came a voice he hadn't heard in months, calm, professional, carrying just the slightest hint of Texas drawl. "Base actual, this is Reaper 7-7. I'm 20 minutes out and carrying a full load of freedom. Someone down there need a hand." Colonel Brennan's weather-beaten face transformed as recognition dawned. After 18 months of silence, Captain Raina Reaper Voss was back in the fight. The woman they'd written off, the pilot they'd grounded, the officer who'd become a ghost story whispered in ready rooms from Kandahar to Kuwait. She was supposed to be flying a desk in Colorado Springs, pushing papers and nursing wounded pride. But the voice on the radio was unmistakable, steady as mountain granite, carrying the kind of confidence that only came from someone who danced with death and led every waltz. Brennan had seen her personnel file, knew the statistics that didn't capture the legend. 300 combat missions, 47 confirmed enemy kills, 0 friendly fire incidents. The kind of record that made other pilots feel inadequate and generals nervous. "Reaper 7-7, how the hell are you?" Brennan started, then caught himself. Questions could wait. His Marines couldn't. "Viper 6 is surrounded in Grid 41 SMD 67,890 30 4,562. Heavy resistance, multiple wounded, ammunition critical." Copy that base. I've got eyes on the valley now. Looks like someone kicked over an anthill down there. There was a pause then. Viper 6, this is Reaper 7-7. I'm your guardian angel today. Mark your position with smoke and keep your heads down. The cavalry's about to announce its arrival. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez leaned over the tactical display, studying the grid coordinates. Sir, that's a hot LZ. AAA positions, possible MANPADS, rough terrain. Even our best pilots wouldn't. She's not our best pilot, Brennan interrupted quietly. She's better. Through the bunker's reinforced windows, a speck appeared on the horizon, too small to identify, moving too fast to track easily. But Brennan knew what it was. He'd watched that particular aircraft tear through enemy positions with surgical precision, had seen it absorb damage that would have downed lesser planes and keep flying on pure determination and titanium bathtub armor. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, call sign Reaper 7-7, was coming home to war, and Captain Raina Voss was about to remind everyone why they called her the Desert Ghost, the pilot who appeared when hope died and disappeared when the impossible became inevitable. The radio crackled again, Viper 6's voice strained with pain and desperate hope. Reaper 7-7, be advised, we've got multiple gun positions and at least 2 Zu-23 anti-aircraft installations. This isn't going to be a milk run. Captain Voss's response carried the weight of experience and something else, something that sounded suspiciously like satisfaction. Viper 6, I didn't fly 800 miles to turn around at the first sign of trouble. Besides, it's been a boring few months. Time to remind these folks why they shouldn't mess with Marines. Brennan found himself smiling for the first time in hours. Raina Voss had always been different from the other pilots, quieter in the ready room, more intense in the cockpit, carrying herself with the understated confidence of someone who'd proven everything that needed proving. While other aviators collected call signs like Maverick or Iceman, she'd earned Reaper the hard way, harvesting enemy combatants with methodical precision that bordered on artistry. The A-10 was closer now, its distinctive twin engines and straight wings unmistakable against the pale morning sky. Built around the GAU-8 Avenger cannon, a weapon so large the aircraft was essentially designed around it, the Thunderbolt was ugly, slow, and absolutely devastating in the right hands. In Voss's hands, it became something approaching divine intervention. Base actual, came another voice over the radio, this one tinged with authority and irritation. This is General Morrison at Division, who authorized air support for this operation. All available assets are committed to Steel Thunder. Brennan hesitated. Morrison was a political animal, more concerned with headlines than body bags. But before he could respond, Captain Voss's voice cut through the channel. Division, this is Reaper 7-7. I'm not part of your dog and pony show. I'm here on my own time, carrying my own ordnance, burning my own fuel. You want to court-martial someone for saving Marines, you can start with me. The audacity was breathtaking. Unauthorized military operations were career-ending offenses, the kind of insubordination that turned decorated officers into cautionary tailies. But as Brennan watched the A-10 descend toward the valley where his Marines waited for rescue or death, he realized that Raina Voss had already counted that cost and found it acceptable. The radio erupted with chatter as other units monitored the frequency, drawn by the drama unfolding in real time. Word was spreading through the military communications network like wildfire. The Desert Ghost was back, flying an unauthorized mission to save a surrounded unit while her superiors debated politics and protocol. Viper 6, I've got visual on your smoke. Looks like you boys picked the scenic route today. Voss's voice carried grim humor despite the circumstances. I'm counting approximately 60 hostiles in a horseshoe formation around your position. They've got you in a classic kill zone, but they made one mistake. What's that, Reaper? Came the exhausted reply from the surrounded Marines. They forgot to invite me to the party. The A-10 banked sharply, its titanium bathtub armor glinting in the morning sun as it lined up for its first attack run. Below, Taliban fighters scrambled for cover, their weapons tracking the approaching aircraft. But they were ground fighters, used to ambushing patrols and planting roadside bombs. They had no experience with the kind of aerial precision that was about to descend upon them. Captain Rena Voss had returned to the war that had defined her, and the war was about to be reminded why some legends never truly fade. They just wait in the shadows for the moment when heroes are needed most. The first burst from the GAU-8 cannon sounded like the world's largest zipper being opened at light speed. 7 barrels rotating at 4,200 rounds per minute, each depleted uranium projectile capable of punching through tank armor. The distinctive BRRRRRRT echoed across the valley, a sound that every American soldier learned to love and every enemy fighter learned to fear. "Holy shit," came Viper 6's voice, filled with sudden hope. "Reaper, you just turned that machine gun nest into abstract art." They pulled up from its attack run, banking hard to avoid the streams of tracer fire now reaching toward it from multiple positions. Red and green bullets drew deadly lines across the morning sky, but Voss flew through them with the casual precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. She'd done this dance before, hundreds of times, in valleys just like this one. "Viper 6, I'm coming around for another pass. You've got approximately 30 seconds to move your wounded to the north side of your perimeter. After that, anything south of the smoke marker is fair game." Colonel Brennan watched the tactical display as Reaper 77's icon maneuvered for position. The A-10 was built for exactly this kind of mission: low altitude, close air support in a target-rich environment. While faster jets had to worry about flying into the ground during attack runs, the Thunderbolt could loiter over the battlefield, picking off threats with deliberate precision. "Base actual," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez reported. "We're monitoring Taliban communications. They're calling for reinforcements and requesting heavy weapons." "How long until they arrive?" Brennan asked. "Best estimate, 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Enough time for Voss to clear the immediate threat around Viper 6, but not enough for a full extraction." The math was brutal and unforgiving. One pilot, one aircraft, against an enemy force that was about to triple in size. Even legends had limits. The second attack run came from a different angle, catching a group of Taliban fighters as they tried to flank the Marines' position. The GAU-8 spoke again, its voice carrying across the desert like thunder, and another enemy position disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris. But return fire was intensifying, and Brennan could see the taking hits, small sparks appearing along its wings as bullets found their mark. "Reaper 77, be advised you're taking damage," Brennan transmitted. "Roger that, base. Nothing the old girl can't handle. She's been shot up before." There was affection in Voss's voice, the kind of bond that developed between pilot and machine when both had cheated death repeatedly. The A-10 was famous for its survivability, designed to fly home on one engine with half its control surfaces shot away. "Viper 6, what's your ammunition status?" Voss asked during her next climb. "We're down to our last magazines. Maybe 5 minutes of suppressive fire left." 5 minutes. The clock was ticking toward a decision that no one wanted to make. Brennan had seen this scenario before: brave pilots pushing too hard, staying too long, turning rescue missions into double casualties. But he also knew that without Voss's intervention, Viper 6 was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. The third attack run targeted the largest concentration of enemy fighters, a group that had been maneuvering to overrun the Marines' weakest flank. Voss came in low and slow, the A-10's engine screaming as she pushed the aircraft to its limits. The cannon fired in controlled bursts, each one precisely aimed, conserving ammunition for the long fight ahead. But this time, the enemy was ready. A shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile streaked up from a concealed position, its white contrail drawing a deadly line toward the A-10's starboard engine. At the last second, Voss rolled the aircraft hard left, deploying chaff and flares in a desperate attempt to confuse the missile's seeker head. The explosion, when it connected, was visible from the command bunker, a bright orange flash followed by a trailing plume of black smoke. Reaper 77 staggered in the air like a wounded bird, its right engine streaming flames and metal fragments. "Mayday, mayday." Voss's voice was strained but controlled. "Reaper 77 has taken critical damage to the starboard engine. I'm losing hydraulics and my flight controls are getting mushy." Colonel Brennan felt his stomach drop. The scenario he dreaded was unfolding in real time, a pilot down, adding another crisis to an already impossible situation. "Reaper 77, can you make it to base?" There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of static and distant gunfire. When Voss finally replied, her voice carried the weight of a decision that would define everything that followed. "Negative, base actual. I've got maybe 5 minutes before this bird comes apart, and Viper 6 doesn't have 5 minutes to spare." The implication hung in the air like smoke from burning jet fuel. Captain Raina Voss was choosing to stay and fight until her aircraft could no longer fly, trading her own escape for the lives of 42 Marines she'd never met. It was the kind of decision that separated warriors from soldiers, heroes from legends. "Reaper, you need to get out of there," Brennan urged. "That's an order." "With respect, sir, I don't take orders from you anymore. I'm not even supposed to be here, remember." There was dark humor in her voice, the gallows comedy of someone who'd already accepted the price of her choices. "Besides, these Marines didn't ask to walk into a kill zone. The least I can do is make sure they walk out." The damaged A-10 lined up for another attack run, trailing smoke and flying on borrowed time. Below, Taliban fighters were regrouping for a final assault on the Marine position, sensing that their tormentor was wounded and desperate. They had no way of knowing that desperate was exactly where Captain Raina Voss operated best. The fourth attack run was different from the others, more aggressive, more precise, more final. Voss brought the A-10 in so low that its landing gear almost touched the desert sand, the GAU-8 cannon firing continuously as she swept across the enemy formation like an avenging angel with titanium wings and depleted uranium teeth. Enemy fighters scattered before the onslaught, their formations dissolving into panic and confusion. Bodies tumbled through the dust clouds kicked up by the cannon fire, and survivors sought whatever cover they could find. For the first time since the ambush began, the pressure on Viper 6's position began to ease. "Outstanding shooting, Reaper," came the relieved voice of the Marine commander. "You just bought us some breathing room." But the celebration was premature. Even as the immediate threat diminished, radio intercepts confirmed that Taliban reinforcements were closing in, trucks loaded with fighters, heavy weapons, and portable anti-aircraft systems. The window for extraction was narrowing with each passing minute. "Viper 6, Voss transmitted, her voice tight with strain as she fought to keep the damaged A-10 airborne. "I need you to consolidate your position and prepare for immediate extraction. We've got company coming, and I won't be able to keep them off you much longer." "Negative, Reaper. We've got wounded who can't be moved and no way to extract without a helicopter. Besides, there's nowhere to land in this terrain." Colonel Brennan stared at the tactical display, watching as enemy icons converged on the valley from 3 directions. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and conventional solutions were running out. But as he studied the terrain around Viper 6's position, a possibility began to emerge, desperate, dangerous, and completely insane. "Reaper 77, he transmitted. "There's a dry riverbed about 2 clicks north of Viper 6's position. It's rough, but it might be long enough and wide enough for an emergency landing." "Sir?" Staff Sergeant Rodriguez looked at him with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. You're not seriously suggesting. I'm suggesting that sometimes the only way out is through, Brennan replied grimly. And sometimes angels have to land before they can carry people to heaven. The radio crackled with Voss's response. Base actual, are you asking me to attempt a combat landing in hostile territory with a damaged aircraft to pick up wounded Marines? That's exactly what I'm asking, Captain. Can it be done? There was another pause, longer this time, filled with the sound of straining engines and approaching enemy vehicles. When Voss finally replied, her voice carried the calm certainty of someone who'd found their purpose in the chaos of war. Sir, I didn't come this far to leave these boys behind. If there's a way to get them home, we're going to find it. The A-10 banked toward the coordinates Brennan had provided, its damaged engine streaming black smoke across the pale desert sky. Below, Viper 6 began the difficult process of moving their wounded toward the improvised landing zone, carrying their brothers through sand and rocks while enemy forces closed in from all sides. Captain Raina Voss was about to attempt something that would either save 42 lives or add her own name to the casualty list. In the annals of military aviation, it would be remembered as either the most heroic rescue attempt in decades or the most spectacular example of why pilots should know when to retreat. But retreat had never been in Reaper's vocabulary, and today wasn't going to be the day she learned that word. The approach to the riverbed was unlike anything in the A-10 flight manual, steep, fast, and complicated by enemy fire from multiple directions. Tracers streaked past the cockpit as Voss fought to keep the damaged aircraft steady, its hydraulic systems failing and its starboard engine coughing like a dying animal. Viper 6, I need that landing zone clear of obstacles and marked with whatever you've got, she transmitted through gritted teeth. I'm coming in hot and heavy, and I won't get a second chance at this. Roger, Reaper. We're moving rocks and using smoke grenades to mark the approach path, but be advised, we've got enemy vehicles approaching from the south. Looks like technicals with mounted weapons. Technicals? Pickup trucks equipped with heavy machine guns or small cannons, the Taliban's preferred mobile weapons platform. Fast, maneuverable, and deadly to aircraft attempting low-altitude operations. They were exactly the kind of threat that made combat landing suicidal rather than merely dangerous. Copy that, Viper 6. How long until they're in firing position? 2 minutes, maybe 3. 2 minutes to execute a landing that should have taken 20 minutes of careful planning and perfect conditions. Voss began her final approach, the A-10's remaining engine roaring as she fought to maintain control of an aircraft that was slowly dying around her. The riverbed rushed up to meet her, its rocky surface and scattered boulders looking less like a runway and more like an obstacle course designed by malevolent gods. At the last second, she pulled up slightly, bleeding off airspeed while praying that the landing gear would hold when it hit the uneven ground. The A-10 touched down hard, bouncing twice before settling onto the desert floor with a grinding crash that sent sparks flying from its undercarriage. The aircraft skidded forward through clouds of dust and debris, its brakes screaming as Voss fought to bring it to a stop before reaching the rocks at the far end of the riverbed. When the dust finally settled, Reaper 77 sat motionless in the middle of nowhere, its engines silent and its pilot still strapped into her ejection seat. For a moment, the only sound was the wind whistling through bullet holes in the aircraft's skin. Then Voss's voice crackled over the radio, shaky but determined. Viper 6, your taxi has arrived. Load your wounded and let's get out of here before the welcome wagon shows up. Marines emerged from their concealed positions, carrying stretchers and supporting their wounded comrades as they ran toward the grounded aircraft. The A-10's cargo compartment had never been designed for passengers, but desperate times called for creative solutions. Wounded Marines were loaded into every available space while their brothers provided security, their rifles trained on the approaches to the riverbed. Reaper, we've got movement to the south, came an urgent report. Multiple vehicles closing fast. Captain Voss was already running through her emergency startup procedures, coaxing life back into systems that had been pushed beyond their design limits. The port engine coughed, wheezed, then roared back to life. The starboard engine remained stubbornly silent, its turbine blades locked in place by battle damage. Single-engine takeoff from rough terrain with maximum weight, she muttered to herself, running calculations that existed more in instinct than in any technical manual. Just another day at the office. The first enemy vehicles appeared at the mouth of the valley, their mounted weapons already traversing toward the grounded aircraft. Time had run out for careful planning and measured decisions. It was time for controlled desperation and the kind of flying that separated legends from statistics. "Hold on back there," Voss called to her improvised passengers. "This isn't going to be smooth." She pushed the throttle forward, feeling the A-10 strain against its own weight as it began to move down the makeshift runway. Rocks pinged against the landing gear, and the aircraft's frame groaned under stresses it was never meant to endure. Behind them, muzzle flashes lit up the desert as enemy fighters opened fire, their bullets whining through the air where the Thunderbolt had been seconds before. The takeoff roll seemed to last forever, each second measured in heartbeats and prayers. The A-10 gathered speed reluctantly, fighting against physics and battle damage as it tried to achieve the impossible. At the far end of the riverbed, a wall of rock waited to claim any aircraft that couldn't generate enough lift to clear it. "Come on, beautiful," Voss whispered to her aircraft, feeling the first tentative signs of lift beneath the wings. "Don't quit on me now." At the last possible second, the A-10 lifted off the ground, its landing gear missing the rocks by inches as it clawed its way into the morning sky. Behind them, the valley erupted in frustrated gunfire as Taliban fighters realized their prey was escaping. But they were too late. Captain Raina Voss had done the impossible once again, turning certain death into unlikely salvation through sheer force of will and flying skill. "Base actual, this is Reaper 77, she transmitted, her voice carrying exhaustion and triumph in equal measure. "Package is secure and en route to friendly territory. 42 souls on board, all accounted for." In the command bunker, Colonel Brennan closed his eyes and offered a silent prayer of gratitude. Around him, radio operators and intelligence analysts broke into spontaneous applause, their professional composure cracking in the face of what they'd just witnessed. But the celebration was tempered by reality. The A-10 was flying on one engine, its hydraulic systems failing, and its pilot had been in the cockpit for more than 4 hours straight. They weren't home yet, and the desert was unforgiving of even small mistakes. "Reaper, what's your fuel status?" Brennan asked. "Running on fumes and adrenaline, sir. I've got maybe 20 minutes before I have to put her down somewhere." 20 minutes to cover the distance back to base, flying a damaged aircraft loaded with wounded Marines. The math was tight, but Voss had already proven that she specialized in making impossible numbers work out in her favor. The flight back to base was a study in controlled crisis management. Systems failed at regular intervals, forcing Voss to compensate with manual controls and pure flying instinct. The A-10's frame groaned under the strain of carrying more weight than it was designed for, while its remaining engine ran at temperatures that would have made manufacturers weep. But the aircraft held together through sheer determination and superior engineering, carrying its precious cargo across the desert wasteland toward safety. Below, the landscape scrolled past like pages from a geography textbook, empty, harsh, and indifferent to the human drama playing out in the sky above. "Base actual, I've got the field in sight," Voss reported as the runway appeared on the horizon. "Requesting emergency vehicles and medical personnel. We've got wounded on board who need immediate attention." "Roger, Reaper. Emergency crews are standing by. You're cleared for immediate landing on any runway." The final approach was a masterpiece of aviation skill, Voss coaxing the damaged A-10 down toward the runway with the delicate touch of a surgeon and the determination of a warrior. The aircraft touched down gently, its landing gear holding despite the abuse it had endured. As it rolled to a stop, emergency vehicles surrounded it like protective guardians, their crews ready to rush the wounded Marines to waiting medical facilities. When the engines finally spun down and silence returned to the flight line, Captain Raina Voss remained in her cockpit for a long moment, her hands still gripping the controls. She had flown through hell and brought everyone home, but the weight of command and consequence was settling on her shoulders like lead armor. Colonel Brennan was waiting when she finally climbed down from the aircraft, his weathered face showing a mixture of relief, admiration, and something approaching awe. Around them, ground crews swarmed over the battle-damaged A-10, cataloging holes and assessing systems that had been pushed far beyond their operational limits. "Captain," Brennan said quietly, "that was either the finest piece of flying I've ever witnessed or the most spectacular example of insubordination in military history. Probably both." Voss pulled off her helmet, revealing a face marked by exhaustion and the red lines left by oxygen mask straps. Her dark hair was plastered with sweat, and her flight suit showed the stains of a mission that had pushed her to her physical and emotional limits. But her eyes held the steady gaze of someone who'd faced the ultimate test and passed. "Sir, with respect, I'd do it again tomorrow if those Marines needed it." "I know you would, Captain. That's what makes you dangerous." Brennan paused, studying the woman who'd just become a legend whether she wanted the title or not. "It's also what makes you exactly the kind of pilot this war needs." Behind them, medics loaded the last of the wounded Marines into ambulances, their lives saved by a pilot who'd been written off as a desk jockey and an aircraft that official policy had declared obsolete. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. Sometimes the cast-offs and discards turned out to be exactly what the situation demanded. As the sun climbed higher in the desert sky, word of the rescue began to spread through the military communications network. Radio operators passed the story from base to base, each retelling adding new details and embellishments. By evening, every American serviceman in Afghanistan would know about the pilot who defied orders, risked everything, and brought 42 Marines home against impossible odds. Captain Raina, Reaper, Voss had returned from exile in spectacular fashion, her legend secured by a single mission that would be talked about in ready rooms and officer clubs for decades to come. She was no longer the disgraced pilot who'd been shuffled off to a desk job. She was the desert ghost who appeared when hope died and made miracles look routine. But legends came with a price, and as Voss walked away from her battle-scarred aircraft, she knew that this mission had changed everything. There would be investigations, boards of inquiry, and career-ending consequences for her unauthorized flight. The Marines she'd saved would go home to their families, but she would face the music alone. Still, as she looked back at Reaper 77 sitting damaged but defiant on the flight line, she felt no regret. Some things were worth the cost, and the lives of 42 Marines were definitely among them. Whatever happened next, she'd sleep well knowing that she'd made the right choice when it mattered most. The war would continue, with its endless cycle of missions and casualties, heroes and victims. But today, at least, the good guys had won. And sometimes, in a conflict that offered few clear victories, that was enough to make all the risk and sacrifice worthwhile. The official report would list the mission as unauthorized close air support, resulting in successful extraction of surrounded friendly forces. But the Marines who'd lived through that nightmare in the valley would remember it differently, as the day an angel with titanium wings descended from heaven to carry them home. In the years that followed, Viper 6's survivors would name their children after Captain Raina Voss. They would tell their grandchildren about the pilot who appeared when no one was coming, who landed in hell itself to give them a ride back to the world of the living. The story would grow with each telling, but the core truth would remain unchanged. Sometimes heroes really do exist, and sometimes they fly A-10 Thunderbolts with call signs that make death seem like just another job requirement. 3 hours after landing, as medical personnel confirmed that all 42 Marines would survive their wounds, Colonel Brennan received a priority message from Division Headquarters. General Morrison's words were clipped and professional, but the subtext was clear. Captain Voss's unauthorized mission had created a political nightmare that would require careful management and strategic scapegoating. "Sir," Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approached with obvious reluctance, "Division wants to see Captain Voss immediately. They're convening a board of inquiry." Brennan nodded grimly. He'd expected this, had known from the moment Voss announced her unauthorized presence that there would be consequences. The military was an organization built on discipline and chain of command, and maverick pilots who ignored both were dangerous precedents that couldn't be allowed to stand. But as he watched the last ambulance disappear toward the base hospital, carrying Marines who would have died without Voss's intervention, he wondered if sometimes the right thing and the legal thing were two different animals entirely. "Tell Division that Captain Voss will report as ordered," he finally said. "And Rodriguez, make sure someone gets her story on record before they make her disappear. History should remember what really happened here today." The staff sergeant nodded and hurried away, leaving Brennan alone with his thoughts and the sound of A-10 engines in the distance. Somewhere out there, other pilots were flying other missions, following orders and staying within the boundaries of acceptable risk. They were good officers doing their jobs professionally and competently. But none of them were legends. None of them had just proven that sometimes miracles came wrapped in titanium armor and powered by pure determination. None of them were Captain Raina, Reaper, Voss, the pilot who turned exile into epic and transformed a career-ending mistake into the kind of story that made young aviators dream of flying into history. The sun was setting over the Afghan desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded everyone watching of fire and blood, and the thin line between heroism and tragedy. In 12 hours, the official investigation would begin, and the wheels of military justice would start grinding toward their inevitable conclusion. But tonight, 42 Marines were alive who should have been statistics, and somewhere in the depths of a damaged A-10, systems were cooling down after being pushed beyond all reasonable limits by a pilot who'd redefined what was possible when everything seemed lost. The desert wind carried the smell of jet fuel and cordite, the familiar perfume of military operations in a hostile environment. It was the smell of war, but tonight it also carried something else, the scent of victory snatched from the jaws of defeat, of legends born in the crucible of impossible choices. Captain Raina Voss had flown her last unauthorized mission, but her first step toward immortality. In the annals of military aviation, her name would be remembered alongside the greatest pilots who'd ever strapped on wings and challenged gravity to a duel. The A-10 Thunderbolt had been built for exactly this kind of mission, but it had taken a pilot like Voss to show the world what the aircraft was truly capable of when flown by someone who refused to accept defeat as an option. Together, pilot and machine had written a new chapter in the story of close air support, one measured not in sorties flown or targets destroyed, but in lives saved and Marines brought home. As the last light faded from the western sky, Reaper 77 sat silent on the flight line, its battle scars gleaming in the harsh fluorescent glow of the hangar lights. Tomorrow, maintenance crews would begin the long process of repairing the damage, replacing systems and patching holes until the aircraft was ready to fly again. But they could never repair the legend that had been born in the skis over Kandahar, or replace the pilot who'd shown them all what it meant to risk everything for brothers in arms. That legend would live forever, passed down from pilot to pilot like a sacred trust, a reminder that sometimes the most important missions were the ones that never appeared on any official flight schedule. The colonel said no one was coming, until an A-10 rose from the dust, carrying an angel with a Texas drawl and a warrior's heart who proved that legends don't retire. They just wait for the moment when heroes are needed most.